Have you ever had a conversation with someone and you're trying to explain something, so you give an example that they're more familiar with so they can understand easier? I know in my experience, every single time the recipient will always nitpick your example and then say false equivalence. The main issue with this is that they don't know what an analogy is. An analogy inherently will always have a difference. What they want is a tautology, saying the same thing twice. Analogies are used to clarify a concept. Tautologies are used for redundancy. People tend to not realize that analogies are completely arbitrary. The only thing that matters is the meaning behind the example. You can use a million examples so long as the meaning is still the same. If you ever studied logic, you'd know that examples aren't an argument. Neither is the person using an analogy trying to make their argument. Here's a quick example. Studying math is like shooting free throws. Practice makes perfect. Now, an idiot would say, but free throws is a muscle memory. Math is about understanding concepts and their applications. I'm going to ask you something. Why do you think I compared the two? No, seriously, pause this video and ask yourself. Of course, the significance behind it is the more you do something, the easier it becomes. It doesn't matter if it's mental or physical. Why do you feel the need to mention that basketball is physical and math is mental? Do you think I don't know that? This is called missing the forest for the trees, which is when you look too much into details that you miss the bigger picture. As much as I hate Muslim discourse, Muslims for the most part actually do a really good job in this regard. They tend to understand that for the most part, the literal words or scenario something is mentioned in matters less than the significance of the message itself. You find this a lot when people use hadith or ayat from different places and connect them to form a narrative. Also, I think this works for Muslims because Allah does this in the Quran too. Take for example this verse in Surah Al-Kahf. No Muslim would say false equivalence, even though you could easily say rain doesn't have social pressures, emotion, cognition, etc. like humans do. We all get the point of the analogy. You're here and then you're gone. So Noor, do false analogies exist? If so, how do we distinguish between a correct analogy and a false analogy? Yes, false analogies exist, and the way we determine the validity of the analogy is like this. Compare the significance between the two premises. If their meaning is correlated, then it's a good analogy. If they're not, then it's a false analogy. Take this for example. Writing a book is like growing a garden. It needs patience and maintenance. This is a good analogy. Both writing and gardening require some form of patience and maintenance. When it comes to writing, if you write faster than you can think, it won't come out well. And if you don't have patience when you plant, you might mess up the process by, let's say, adding more water. If you don't maintain your writing by doing multiple revisions, it won't come out well. If you don't maintain your garden by cleaning it often and continuing to nourish it, your crops will die. Here is a false analogy. Writing a book is like growing a garden. The tools you use reflect the outcome you receive. The reason this is bad is because the tools you use when it comes to writing don't impact your work. You can write on a laptop, paper, typewriter, speech to text, whatever. It only works on one of the premises, gardening, because using bad tools does impact the growth of your garden. Your bad tools might add too much water, have not enough room, whatever the case may be. So the takeaway is, whenever analogy is brought up, don't just jump the gun and try and find out how they differ. Try and find out how they relate. This will allow for a much more richer conversation. Otherwise, the conversation will just divulge into trying to find analogies that work and then nitpicking all of them, completely missing the point. If you find someone doing this, just leave them. If they're not able to understand the significance behind your words and just focus on the words themselves, they're looking for a debate, not a discussion. They don't care what you have to say, so don't care what they have to say. So if you see this happen, go put on Quran because that would be a better use of your time. With that said, Assalamu alaikum.
أيقنت أن الله يجبر خاطري لما بكيت ولم أجد إلا هو ناديت والمحراب يحضن أدمعي الله